Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing with my Archaeologist guide to Minecraft by discussing probably one of my favorite topics in archaeology. We are talking about trade and exchange. Trade and exchange is all about the movement of goods from one person to another, or the movement of services or something. It is basically giving something to someone else. And that can be with the expectation of getting something in return, or you might not actually have that expectation. In anthropology, which is very closely related to archaeology, and in some parts of the world, archaeology is actually a subfield of anthropology. In anthropology, there are generally three categories of trade and exchange. There's reciprocity, there's redistribution, and there is market exchange. Now, there's a lot of really good Scrabble words in here, so let's talk about what these actually mean. Reciprocity is the exchange of goods in a non-market system. There are three kinds of reciprocity. The first is generalized reciprocity, which is where you give something to somebody else without expecting anything in return. And a really good example of this is, say, giving a gift to a young child. If you're giving a 6-year-old a gift at the holidays, you're not really expecting that 6-year-old to give you a gift in return. If they do, that's really nice, but you as the adult are not really expecting a 6-year-old to reciprocate that gift. Another good example is giving to charity. When you give funds or goods to a charitable organization, you're not really expecting that charity to give you something in return, or at least ideally you shouldn't be, right? So the whole idea is that you're giving without expecting something in return. The second type of reciprocity is balanced reciprocity. Balanced reciprocity is giving someone something and expecting something in return of equal value. And that can happen either immediately or it can happen within a specified time frame, but there's always a deadline where something of equal value is expected in return for whatever you have given. A really easy example of this is if you've ever been to a pub or a bar and somebody buys rounds. If one person buys rounds for the table, they are expecting that other people at the table will then buy them rounds, either in that pub visit or in future pub visits until it's their turn to buy rounds again. And then the third type of reciprocity is negative reciprocity, and this is basically any form of exchange where somebody is effectively trying to grift the other person, basically expecting something in return for nothing. That can be true of just one party in the exchange, or it can be true of both of them. So that's reciprocity. What about redistribution? Redistribution is the accumulation of goods or labor or services by a particular person or entity for the purpose of redistributing it to everyone involved at a later date. So an example for that might be that your office is collecting funds for this year's holiday party. You give a certain amount of money to a single person in the office who is collecting those funds, but then they use those funds to create the office holiday party and everybody benefits from it. Another example of redistribution, regardless of how you might feel about it, is taxes. Taxes are when the government collects a certain amount of funds from all of the citizens with the idea that they will redistribute those funds through public works that benefit society as a whole. And then after redistribution, we have market exchange. Market exchange is when goods and services are bought and sold with prices or set exchange equivalencies. When you go to the supermarket, somebody can tell you how much it's going to cost to buy some bread, and even though the same loaf of bread might have slightly different prices depending on the store you go to, they're all within a generally set range of prices because market exchange abides by supply and demand. The easiest examples of market exchange are current economies where we use money, but market exchange doesn't have to use currency or money. It can exist in exchange for other things that are routinely accepted as part of exchange within a society. And you may have heard that there are some cultures that use cowrie shells or perhaps glass beads as currency. That is sort of true, but actually not necessarily, especially when it comes to something like the glass beads. Depending on where you are, they weren't necessarily currency, they were just something that was commonly accepted in exchange for goods. Now at this point, you're probably sitting there saying, but Archaeoplays, I've heard a lot about this thing called bartering, and you haven't talked about that at all. That's because barter is kind of, it depends on who you talk to where bartering actually fits in these three. Some people say that it is a form of balanced reciprocity, and I am more one of those people. Others say that it is part of market exchange, but kind of like a proto-market exchange, and still others say that it's actually a fourth category of trade and exchange within anthropology. There's a lot of debate about this, and if you're really curious, you can check out all of the economic anthropological theories about trade and exchange. If you absolutely want to jump down that rabbit hole, by all means, go right ahead. I've been down that rabbit hole. It's a fun time. But for our purposes, and what seems to be kind of the consensus at this point, sort of, is that barter is a form of balanced reciprocity. Bartering is goods and services being exchanged for other goods and services without using a medium of exchange like the money, the currency, or the things that are frequently accepted in exchange that I was talking about for market exchange. So basically, bartering is goods and services being immediately exchanged for other goods and services in a non-market economy. In this village, we have leather workers and we have toolsmiths. Now, in Minecraft, you can craft different job blocks for the villagers, and they will then use those blocks to become, say, a leather worker or a toolsmith or a farmer or a cleric or what have you. Most players will find a village, use various game mechanics to grow the village, and then assign each new villager a new job based on what the player needs, because that's how the game is designed. We're not going to do that here. Remember that we're treating this as a living, breathing world. That means that the villagers are the way they are for a reason, and I'm going to leave them as having the specialties they spawn with instead of adding jobs as I need them. On the one hand, it's nice to have so many leather workers because once we upgrade them, we'll have saddles for days, you guys. On the other hand, this village doesn't have a farmer, a butcher, or a shepherd, so it doesn't have an easy source of food. I'm wanting to get at least one potato, but because they don't have an easy source of food, a single potato here is going to be far more valuable to this community than it would to, say, a farming village where they're just growing potatoes themselves. So, there are two different types of exchange that I can engage in here: reciprocity and market exchange. Looking at the villagers' trades, you can see that they're willing to buy certain goods from me, like my coal, or to sell me certain goods for emeralds, which is their currency. I don't have any emeralds on me, but I could sell some coal to this toolsmith and get an emerald in return if I wanted. But right now, I'm not really interested in the goods that they have for market exchange. Instead, right now, I want to get a potato, and I want to form a positive relationship with these villagers so that they're more likely to trade with me in the future. And this is where a big difference between market exchange and reciprocity comes in. In general, not always, but in most cases, reciprocity is more about the relationship between the people or groups involved than it is about the items or services being exchanged, while market exchange is far more about the goods and services than it is about the relationship between the people doing the exchange. That doesn't mean that reciprocity ignores the goods or services or that market exchange doesn't care about relationships. It's more that reciprocity usually emphasizes and prioritizes relationships, while market exchange usually emphasizes and prioritizes goods, services, and currency. I absolutely want a potato, but becoming friendly with this village is far more of a priority for me. Because of that, I've opted for reciprocity here. I don't have huge amounts to offer in terms of items, but the cave I've been lighting up and the ravine I've been dealing with are both really dangerous. What's going on with... Oh, there's a house down there! That villager is gonna drown. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's save this villager from drowning for a second. Hang on. So, as I was saying, lots of dangerous things around here. Instead of goods, then, I've offered my services in saving this house from massive flooding, lighting up that cave, and blocking off the ravine. I think that's enough to warrant a potato or two, and it should really strengthen my relationship with this village. And with that, I'm gonna end this episode here. We've gotten what we came for, we've made some friends. I think it's actually time to head back home and get this potato in the ground. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and also hit that notification bell if you'd like to be among the first to know when I upload a new episode. That's all from me for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!